Hi, we're starting this series on Ephesians, and Nathan's asked me to do some historical, cultural and geographic background to Ephesus itself to give you some context around what is actually going on there. I'll split it into three parts for you. This first part is from the beginnings of Ephesus through to the 1st century, and then I'll take it from the 1st century, the early church, and then to what happened to Ephesus. So we're going to start by talking about where Ephesus appears in the Bible. In the New Testament, it's there for 21 times. These are some of the verses that are there. It's also the subject of 3 letters, Ephesians, Timothy 1, Timothy 2, and in Revelations, it's part of a prophecy. So where is Ephesus? Ephesus is on the west coast of modern-day Turkey. It's a very strategic location, and as you'll see, a very important hub, not only for the Roman Empire, but for the Greek Empire and the Persian Empire. Ephesus was right on the coast here, and Darius I built a royal road that brought goods and services from the heart of the Persian Empire all the way to the coast to Ephesus itself. And this is the first time it's really used as a major hub. But in the 7th century, going back, the Lydian kings ruled it. That was from 687 to 547. And it became a major city. They built a temple there, which I'll talk about shortly, but it was an incredible piece of work. It was one of the 7 wonders of the world. But this royal road that Darius built when the Persians took over brought lots of goods and services to the ports of Ephesus, and they were sent out to the Western Mediterranean and the Eastern Mediterranean, to the empires of Carthage, Egypt, the Etruscans, the Romans, the Greeks. And then all goods and services from those places came back to Ephesus, back to Sardis, down the Royal Road, back to the heart of the Persian Empire. It was huge trading. But one of the interesting things about the Lydian kings is they actually made Ephesus one of the great cities, but with equal opportunity for men and women. But this was the original harbour. As you can see, it was a very large, shallow harbour, perfect for trade. But over the time, this silted up. And if you go onto Google Earth and look at Ephesus in the satellite mode, in this section here, you'll actually see the remains of the ancient Roman harbour. But this is where the coastline is today. But now back to the temple. This temple was one of the 7 wonders of the world. It was originally built in the 6th century and was 4 times larger than the Parthenon. It was a massive structure, but incredibly beautiful. But sadly, in 356 BC, a man who wanted to have his name remembered throughout history burnt it down. But interesting, that night, Alexander the Great was born. And Alexander the Great invaded Turkey in 334 BC and took over Ephesus. He offered to rebuild the great temple as long as his name was on the portal of it. But the Ephesian priest said, "Oh, thank you very much, sir. We really appreciate that, sir. But it's not fitting that a god should build a temple to another god." So the Ephesians rebuilt the temple itself, and it took them 220 years, but it was magnificent. Because it wasn't just a place for religious services, it was huge. And that temple served as the bank for the ancient world in that area. But not only that, it actually had a museum in it with statues and paintings and artwork from across the world was stored there and shown and displayed. The temple itself possessed valuable lands, it controlled the fisheries, and the priests were the bankers of that part of the ancient world, with all that trade coming from Persia and from the Mediterranean. But beyond that, it was also a sanctuary city, which means criminals who got there couldn't be arrested within bowshot of the walls. So around the temple grew up this city of thieves and murderers and other criminals. But as well as having the priests and all this commerce around it, it also had a lot of artisans. People making little silver statues of the goddess Artemis and of the shrines around the area to sell them to the many pilgrims that actually came there. Now, the goddess Artemis is kind of a bit odd. There she is, Artemis, or Diana, as she became known in the Roman world, the huntress, and the Queen of Heaven was one of her many titles, as well as the Mother Goddess. But in Ephesus, she was an amalgam of the Cybele, which was the Amazon god originally, and Diana the Huntress. And you see that the animals are very prevalent on her costume, and the bits around her chest are probably not what you're thinking. They're actually bull's testicles, because they were a symbol of potency and fertility. And that's what they were worshipping when Paul turned up. And this was what the city would have looked like. So originally it was built on this large grey part, the darker grey. But as the harbour silted up, the major city moved down onto the plain, and the Romans built this harbour with this channel that was dredged out. But slowly the harbour silted up. So this is the city that Paul came to, this magnificent city, the seventh wonders of the world, a 25,000-seat theatre, a coliseum as well. It had markets, it had warehouses, it was a seaport, and it was just a marvellous, magnificent city with over 100,000 people, and was second only to Rome in wealth and power. Next week, I'll talk to you about the early church and what happened with Paul's second and third missionary journey, about Timothy, and about some other notable people who came there. Thank you.